been a weird year of college football. And granted, yes, it's only been 3 weeks in. There really hasn't been a ton of teams that have stood out in terms of being elite and being consistent. One team that has is the Georgia Bulldogs. And to me, at this point, I don't really know who can compete with them right now. Now, as the season progresses, we're going to see teams stand out. We're going to see teams improve. So maybe there are a handful of teams that will be at that point. But right now, I don't really know, in my opinion, if anybody can compete with Georgia. And maybe you guys think differently. So obviously, let me know. But we're going to dive into on their schedule concerns me. We're going to look at the players that have been playing well for Georgia and maybe some concerns, and then look at the teams in college football in general when we get to the playoff that could upset Georgia. 3-0 start is not really unexpected. The thumping that they provided to Oregon and South Carolina pretty much were. At least the Oregon one was for sure, but after that, I think people have probably expected the South Carolina thumping to happen. 49-3 against the Ducks, a Samford win, 33-0 in there, and then at South Carolina, a 48-7 win. This is an extremely dangerous team. This is not a team that is messing around. And this is a team that, despite all of the NFL draft talent they lost, is continuing to be an absolute force to be reckoned with. Now, when you look at the rest of their schedule, they're probably not losing the next 4 games: Kent State, Missouri, Auburn, Vanderbilt. They're also probably not losing to Florida after what we've seen from the Gators after week 1. Tennessee is probably their toughest test remaining. Then you go at Mississippi State and at Kentucky. Those will be decently tough tests, but at this point, it feels like Georgia's just going to run through that too, finishing the year with Georgia Tech, another win. So the schedule doesn't really provide you with too many concerns. The thing that you have to go into next is the personnel. With the amount of NFL talent that Georgia lost, this is a team that should not be playing this well right now. That is super concerning. Stetson Bennett was one of those X factors that we were concerned about. We didn't really know what to expect from him this year. I think a lot of people, including Georgia fans, were concerned that he was not going to be able to handle the expectations. He's not only met those expectations, but he's exceeding them. He is playing at a high level. He is doing things that I don't think anybody expected from him. And this is a guy who is already showing that he can distribute the ball to his playmakers, but also be a factor, a guy that teams have to scheme for and scheme against. Teams have to take him into consideration. They have to realize that, hey, this guy can throw the ball. And that's huge for a Georgia team that needed the offense to step up. The defense lost a ton of talent, more so than the offense. You looked at all the NFL draft picks they lost. Everybody kind of expected the defense to take a step back. Not only have they not done that, it's like they're almost back on track. Maybe not as good or as dominant as this group was, but they've only allowed 10 total points and 1 touchdown. And that's against Oregon, who just beat BYU today, and a South Carolina team that I think a lot of people expected to be really good and has some playmakers that are good. This is a team that's dominating in every aspect of the game. Defense has stepped up. That's a young and inexperienced defense. They don't care. They're so much more talented than the guys they face, and they know that. That's the biggest key for them is this defense is playing with a ton of confidence. And that's a scary group to face, because if their defense is playing like that and their offense is taking a step up from last year, then you're in for a long day, a long game when you face the Georgia Bulldogs. And when you look at the rest of the country, there aren't many teams that can compete with them. So when we look at these next few teams, we're going to look at what could they do to beat Georgia, but also the concerns that we have with those teams. Okay, so we have to start with Alabama. That's the first team that we always have to start with. The Tide are 3-0, and they have not looked good in one of those games. They beat the bad teams that they faced in weeks 1 and 3. So we know that they can beat bad teams. Texas don't really know what they are. We don't really know. They kind of, they struggled with UTSA. So what does that mean for Alabama? This is a team that offensive line struggled last week against Texas, and the defense at times struggled to stop a passing attack. Now, luckily, Quinn Ewers got hurt, but this is an Alabama team that has some serious concerns. There are some things that I'm not really sure about. And That's going to be something that they have to address. Obviously, I trust Nick Saban to get that done, but you just don't know. Ohio State is next. Extremely explosive offense that struggled with Notre Dame, a team that lost to Marshall in week 2. So what does that mean? Is that something we should read into? Is that just like last year where they struggled with Oregon and lost? Then they figure things out at the end of the year. So is this the same team? The defense, I think, is still got some steps to take. And when it comes to the college football playoff, if you can't score on Georgia, then you're kind of in trouble because right now, I don't think Ohio State's defense is ready for a Georgia offense, which is weird to say, but it's just the truth. But that's the team that I think is the next best chance of competing with at Georgia, competing with that team, and I just still have concerns about them. Michigan is the next team. I think Michigan is on a crash course, obviously, to play with Ohio State for the Big Ten championship, at least a trip to the Big Ten championship. And I just don't really know for Michigan because we haven't seen them play anybody. So that's the biggest concern. Is JJ McCarthy legit? So far, he can beat bad competition. Doesn't really tell me anything. This is a group that's dominating that competition, though. So that's one thing. And this is a defense that I think is just as good as they were last year, maybe a little bit behind where they were last year, but I think that they're still really, really good. Clemson has their struggles. I think that quarterback is going to be a big concern for them. This defense of theirs can hang with anybody. Them and Georgia are really, really good. I think that they'll be just fine. Oklahoma has an offense that is pretty good. Defense, I think, has some talent. And I think that they'd be okay, but I don't know if they're on the level of the Georgia Bulldogs. Lastly, USC. Lincoln Riley comes in and brings Caleb Williams with him. I think that this offense can score on anybody. I think that they're are super good, super talented. And I think that Lincoln Riley is a great offensive mind that's going to be able to score points. The problem is that their defense worries me. The problem right now is that their defense can give up points to teams that they really shouldn't. I mean, you saw Stanford at times, they couldn't stop EJ Smith, they couldn't stop Tanner McKee. That's the biggest concern. Outside of those 6 teams, I don't see anybody that can compete with Georgia. There's not a team that's on this level. Maybe if Tennessee finds a way to move on up. Other than that, no, there's nobody on there that I think can hang with Georgia, at least at this point. And right now, that's a scary team to face. This is a team that is head and shoulders above everybody else right now. And yes, a lot can change, but right now, there's not a team that has the offensive firepower and the defensive fortitude that Georgia does. And that makes them the scariest team in college football in a year where we're kind of having a lot of chaos. So you're looking at a team that is probably going to the playoff, probably winning the SEC. And right now, until further notice, no one's really going to stop them.